Hello and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective, a discussion of state, local, and national issues with a libertarian flair. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the former two-time state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. Appreciate you tuning into our broadcast very much. As always, we have a very full agenda on our show today, and we're very fortunate to have a couple of special guests with us today. Jonathan Loesche of the Libertarian Party of Florida. Jonathan, welcome. Good to have you on board.
Thank you for having me.
And Richard Nader, who has occupied the seat before and did such a great job that we actually recruited you to come back as well. So we appreciate you showing up.
At least I got one fan.
Great to have you. Great to have you guys back. And Richard, I'm going to ask you the same question in just a second. But Jonathan, I don't know. I don't think you've been on the show with me before, or whatever. Maybe for some of our viewers, it's the first time they're seeing you here.
Well, I did host the show last month.
Okay. So why don't you give us just 30 seconds about how you found the Libertarian Party and what made the Libertarianism of interest to you?
But yeah, unlike a few other libertarians, I'm actually a former Democrat. I basically, kind of funny story is I went to college, started taking some economics classes out of the blue. Met John Stossel when I was a freshman at Florida State, and just started researching it. Because I always had some differences with the Democratic Party, particularly in terms of gun rights and. There's like, sort of the whole tax and spend thing, and then I started founding the Libertarian Party. It fit my ideas about social issues along with, sort of a liberal social policy, conservative fiscal policy. And then when I moved back to Jacksonville, I found you guys, and, the rest is history.
The rest is history. Well, we're certainly glad to have you on board. I mean, there was a car company that had an advertising campaign a few years back. It was something that the more you look, the more you like. And we typically find that, sometimes people find libertarianism because of one issue or something, and then as they learn a little bit more about it, they start to understand, gosh, this idea and concept of liberty is kind of a concept of unity. I mean, it applies in a lot of different areas. And gosh, if I actually believe it in this area, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me not to believe it in this other area, right?
Exactly.
So, well, it's a great story. And Richard, the Reader's Digest version on you. How did you end up?
I got to meet Harry Brown in 1999, and I was a political neophyte, although a news watcher from a very young age. My mom will attest. And but listening to him, and getting to talk to him actually at the end of his presentation, I come to realize that I'm not a conservative, not a liberal, and but I am a libertarian. I want to live, and I want to let others live as they will, and defend their right to do as they choose, and allow myself to do the same. So libertarianism since 1999.
Yeah, and you're actually the regional representative for this area for the Libertarian Party of Florida, so you have multi-county responsibilities here, and we appreciate all your work on that behalf.
Well, thank you. I try to participate at one level or another since then, and just see where it will go and watch the party grow.
Fantastic. Well, again, welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
As I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, we actually got a full agenda, and so we're going to go ahead and put up an overhead that shows some of the things we're going to talk about today. Certainly very topical right now, the Obama jobs bill, which has been dubbed a $447 billion tax increase. Certainly going to be interested in both of your reactions to that. Also want to have a brief discussion of the Obama presidency in terms of where you guys see it, what you see as strengths, weaknesses, kind of your overall referendum on that. Also going to be interested in getting your observations on the Republican primary debates. We've had a series of Republicans that's certainly been very much in the news lately, and some of the deemed frontrunners in particular. I'll be interested in getting some of your reaction to that. Certainly one of the things coming out of the Republican debates has been this whole soundbite, is Social Security a Ponzi scheme? So we're going to have a little bit of a talk about that. I'll get your reactions to that. Local to the state of Florida, a recent bill signed by our governor, Rick Scott, around drug testing to receive welfare benefits. Going to see if you guys think that that's a good idea. And then finally, a quick note about our Jacksonville city budget here. Is closing libraries and fire stations the only way for us to meet our budgetary goals? So lots of things on the agenda, guys. We'll go ahead and jump right in. Our next overhead does talk about the Obama jobs bill, and we have already spent about $1.3 trillion, this is under Obama, in stimulus money, and certainly a lot of people are kind of scratching their heads and saying, gosh, well, why didn't that work? The costs of what was proposed last week by the president include things like extending unemployment benefits at a $49 billion price tag, hiring of a bunch of additional teachers, which some people have actually dubbed bailing out the teachers' unions because it actually involves so much spending on education and so much hiring for new teachers, and a temporary tax cut, underline there being temporary, the idea that businesses don't really make a lot of long-term plans based on temporary tax cuts, and what's around the corner after those temporary tax cuts expire is a huge tax increase. And so a lot of people talking about the negative impacts about that in terms of the president's program. And then real quickly on to the next overhead, and then I'll get your guys' reactions. Just continuing around this stimulus bill, more infrastructure spending, and as I said, right around the corner, tax hikes of over $250, for those making over $250,000 a year, a tax hike. So I guess closing comments, and just to tee off the discussion with you guys, as we look at the stimulus program and the lack of impact of the program, do either of you feel that the problem is that we've not spent enough government money? I mean, look, the federal government currently spending about 24% of our gross domestic product. State and local governments add another 10-15% of that. You know, we are over 40, you know, right around 40% of the gross domestic product being spent by government at one level or the other. And folks, as libertarians, isn't the real answer for us to stop spending, cut taxes, reduce our debt, and roll back regulations. So when you see that kind of a roll call and those kind of figures in terms of the percentage of the gross domestic product, how much we've spent on stimulus spending, Jonathan, your reaction?
I mean, you know, it's easily, like, you know, we keep calling this, you know, something akin to, you know, the Great Recession, or calling, or, you know, a lot of comparisons to the lost decade in Japan, and I think that's very telling. The fact that basically we've spent, not just under Obama, remember these, you know, TARP and all of that extended to, you know, George Bush, none of it has worked. And, you know, like I said, it's just a quick fix. It's a very, hey, we spent money, we put money in the pockets. And really, and this is even more for the government spending, it's the hidden tax nobody talks about, the inflation tax. You know, because, I mean, you know, even a decade ago, you know, we all remember things like milk, which is now $4 a gallon, was $2 a gallon. You know, cost of electric bills have doubled for some people. You know, the only thing that stayed the same is wages for a lot of people. And that's the real downfall of government spending is, you know, we just keep pumping money and money and money. And what does it really do? It just keeps, you know, keeps us on the little wheel.
Yeah. So. Richard, is the answer to economic doldrums to roll out the president's plan and to spend more government money?
As government policy, the concept of pummeling the stuffing out of hens in the hope of producing more eggs, to me is a bit counterintuitive. I would think that you would actually want to like job creators if what you're looking for is more jobs. What this bill does is simply squeeze free market people for whatever they've got left to hand over to the unions to generate more union members and then therefore more contributions back to the Democrat Party. Not a big fan. The other question would be, why would anybody that's ever read anything Einstein wrote on a social level not remember that his most famous quote, besides E = MC squared, is repeating the same thing that you've done over and over again, expecting a different result, is a definition of insanity. This is nuts.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so, you know, government is not the solution to these kind of problems, and to always look to government to try to solve these type of problems is obviously a mistake. And with that comment, you know, we'll roll into our next overhead, which is this discussion of the Obama presidency. Let's go ahead and put that up. And the reason that I'm dovetailing this discussion into what you just mentioned, Richard, is, you know, I think that so many people projected onto Barack Obama what they wanted to see in terms of, you know, hope and change. Here's a fresh face, who's somebody who's going to change the system, who's going to change government. We do have to acknowledge the fact that as a candidate, he enjoyed widespread demographic support. He certainly mobilized a lot of disenfranchised voters, people that were not participating in the system, certainly young voters, you know, very charismatic, a lot to like about him in terms of personality and things along those lines. But as you step back and evaluate his, you know, 3 years or whatever in office, what do you see as, Jonathan, as successes, and what do you see as shortcomings?
You know, speaking with the younger Bill, I'm 23. With my generation, you know, the people who were born from about the mid-'80s to the early '90s, we grew up during the Bush years. We grew up with 9/11. We grew up with Iraq. We grew up seeing family and friends have to go off to war, and we were tired of it. We were, pardon my language, we were pissed off and tired and hope and change is what we wanted. And obviously that is not what we got. We got more wars. Gitmo is still there. The feds are still raiding marijuana clinics. Certainly, and government is still expanding, even though, well, we basically told us that was going to happen. And I see very little that is a positive so far from his presidency. So
yeah, I understood. Richard, you have a long list of successes if you were asked to rattle them off about the Obama presidency?
Oh, absolutely. He's managed to collapse several entire sectors of the economy by himself. Healthcare is a wonder. His program to reduce the cost of healthcare, American Healthcare Affordability Act, actually is making it more expensive. There are now 50 million people that don't have health insurance. The idea of a charismatic leader coming out of nowhere, capturing the imagination, and I mean that in several different ways, of a nation rising to the top and changing its direction has happened before, not always with positive results. One would hope that this new generation of voters that came to the forefront in 2008 will have the same reaction that a child would have when they stick his fingers into the toaster, snatch them back, and think twice about reaching in for that ballot box again.
Yeah, very, very point, very, very well taken. It's always fascinating to me how the media creates candidates, and how the media can kind of put spins on things. And I certainly think that as you look at Barack Obama and his candidacy and about the kind of media coverage that he got, the saturation of media coverage that he got. I mean, it's always kind of amazing to me how those things work. And I think that really, for me, it just boils down to the fact that, and I mean, I say this as a libertarian, so I don't necessarily have a foot in the Republican camp or in the Democrat camp. I'm a libertarian, but frankly, any objective analysis of this man's resume shows that he's never been responsible to run anything in his life. I mean, frankly, I think our experience to be president was probably greater than what his was. Now, I realize he was around the Senate, and I realize he went to elite academic institutions, but in terms of actually managing, administrating, being a leader around anything, really a very, very scant resume. And so, to a certain extent, maybe I'm not surprised to see that he's not been as effective as some people might have wanted. So
he did run unopposed in his Senate seat in Illinois, and for his state Senate seat in Illinois. So, I mean, his first actual campaign and election was for the presidency, and it literally, he was an empty suit to which America poured its own image into, and we'd still have an empty suit.
And I think the way that he won so convincingly, I think you saw this with the Democratic leadership in the House and Senate. They saw that as a referendum for big government, 70s-style policies that America has rejected time and again, and we are seeing sort of the backlash of that. So, and like you said, it was sort of the empty suit because, I think this isn't just the Barack Obama presidency. This is the presidency of sort of big government Nancy Pelosi types.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah. Well put. Well, on the other side of the coin now, we've had in the news recently the Republican primary debates, and we've got an overhead that we're going to put up around this. It's again how the media makes candidates. It's very interesting. Maybe a month ago everybody was all about Michelle Bachmann. Now Rick Perry and Mitt Romney seem to be nominated as the front runners, and Bachmann and some of the other folks are put in the category of also-rans. Certainly the areas of focus by the candidates, certainly a lot of emphasis on repealing Obamacare, or at least giving the states an option to opt out of that particular program. So that's certainly been part of that. Of course, our old friend Ron Paul, who was a Libertarian presidential nominee in 1988, has certainly had a prominent spot on stage. It's almost looked like he's going to square off with Rick Perry, maybe in a Texas showdown a time or two during these debates. I do want to get your predictions in terms of the Republican primary, but while we have this slide up, let's go ahead and roll right into the other one, because this has been a topic that was a soundbite that just came out of a recent Republican debate, and it's around, is Social Security a Ponzi scheme? This was a big thing around Rick Perry, the governor of Texas, who had that as a soundbite. And so Rick Perry would say yes to that, and libertarians would also say yes to that. For those that don't know, this guy Charles Ponzi, early 1900s, ran a scam where he got promised investors great returns on the money they invested with him, but his plan was to recruit new investors and pay the old investors with proceeds from what he collected. And so basically the question is Social Security a Ponzi scheme? And as we look at the breakdown in terms of the number of people paying into the system versus beneficiaries, we see was 16-1 back in the 50s. It's 3-1 now. It's going to be 2-1 in 2030. It's destined to actually pay out more than what it takes in around that time, around 2030. And, the thing about it is, Ponzi at least had to get people voluntarily to contribute to his plan. He actually had to sell it to people. This, of course, is a mandatory program. And it's always interesting to have people say to me, we don't want to trust the fluctuations of the stock market or a bank with my retirement money, as if Social Security is something that's etched in stone and can't change. But it has been ruled that this is a program that Congress can change or modify or end, that it is not a contract of any type. And there was actually a Supreme Court case that is referenced right there. There is actually no contract guaranteeing payments that exist. So it is the ultimate political promise. So having said all that, guys, a quick take, your take on the Republican primary, what you see in terms of the candidates there, and then do you think that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme?
Absolutely, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. And in fact, if you're watching this video on our YouTube channel, there are a couple of videos in our favorites that go into, they're about a half-hour long a piece, but they go into great depth on showing the exact ins and outs of Social Security and why there is, in fact, I believe basically essentially that going by the current Social Security standards, the government will pay outs of about $40 quadrillion by 2060.
Wow. That's almost a hard figure to believe.
That is not with the B or T. That is QU quadrillion.
I almost can't even envision that.
Yes.
That's almost hard to imagine. So
you're going to have to buy some extra zeros for your billboard. Maybe glue them out on the side. That's just unreal. I remember reading just recently. Now, payers of Social Security, you got 3-1. Payers of Social Security are the gainfully employed. Yeah. Currently, with the employment rate being what it is and the real employment rate being what it is, I read very recently, maybe even this morning, that number is actually 1.75 to 1. Mm-hmm. That because of the high long-term unemployment and short-term unemployment that's happening right now, that number has actually shrunk even faster. And so the doomsday for Social Security is rapidly approaching. The Social Security Trust Fund is all full of Treasury notes, IOUs, that the government has to pay back. Social Security is big enough to pull this country down, just the way Greece is crashing economically. Is it a Ponzi scheme? Yes. Has it been one since the second year of its existence? I absolutely. The only difference, of course, like you said, Ponzi's scheme was voluntary.
Yeah.
Madoff, he actually had to convince each investor to get involved in his deal, whereas I frankly had no choice, and at this point would be willing to give up. Every dime I've invested in Social Security, I'm 45 years old. I've got 20 years left of retirement. I would be willing to give up every dime I've paid in exchange for the money that I haven't paid in yet to invest in my own.
Yes, and certainly, and from an actuarial sense, even if you simply put that money in a savings account, you would actually be much further ahead when it comes time for retirement.
I'm thinking a coffee can.
Yeah, but perhaps even a coffee can, under the mattress, perhaps. It's really interesting to me, and frankly, I never really realized this until doing a little bit of research a few years ago. Even Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he was proposing this plan, he saw it as a temporary program. I mean, he realized that the demographic trends would never sustain a program like Social Security over a long period of time, and certainly not with all the other things that have been added to it. I mean, in terms of the recipients and things like that along those lines. I think back to there's a quote from a famous politician, I don't know who it was, and this is 15, 20 years ago, who basically said something like, look, I don't care if Social Security is, $500 billion in debt. If it keeps my mother-in-law from having to live with me, it's money well spent. I think that to a certain extent, Social Security actually has contributed to family bonds being broken or more distant than what they used to be, where people used to take care of themselves a little bit more. Yeah. I also think that the simple fact of the matter is, and I sometimes get cold stares when I mention this to my friends who are on the left-hand side of the political spectrum, but in a general sense, Social Security is one of the most regressive taxes you could ever have. I mean, the mandatory withdrawal from a person's paycheck, that percentage hits a low-income person a lot more heavily than it does in terms of its impact to higher-income members. But the other thing is, in a macro sense, it is a program that transfers a tremendous amount of wealth from the least prosperous segment of society, the working class, to what on average is the most prosperous class in society, which is retirees. I mean, you literally have people that are blue-collar workers, single mothers, people struggling to get by who are being taxed, so Social Security checks get sent to what on average is an affluent group of Americans. Yeah. So, real quick before I ask you guys to give a comment on some of the local events that are going on here, Republican primaries, what do you see from that? Who do you see emerging?
It's funny because there's that video of Jon Stewart did on the Daily Show about how, talking about making candidates and how Ron Paul has been polling either first or second practically all of these, and he has been flatly ignored. I think at the end of the day, I doubt Ron Paul is going to get the nomination just because, like I said, the media manufactures this stuff, and the same thing happened in 2008. I think it's going to happen again. Whether it be Rick Perry, Mitt Romney, somebody's going to get the nomination, and I can't see it. It's going to be more of the same, pretty much. I'm sure the Tea Parties, though, they'll be, or at least most of them will certainly halt whoever is the Republican candidate and toe the line, and it will be more of the same, pretty much. So,
Richard, your take?
Michelle Bachmann for VP. I would say there's a better than 50% chance that Michelle Bachmann will get the nod for the vice president she'll pick, and that one of the two front runners is between the two of them, they have a better 50% chance of being the nominee. I think the era of the come from behind breakout candidate, I just don't see that happening anymore. I think that era is come and gone. The Reagan came out of the pack and jumped out in front. I just don't see that happening this time. It hasn't happened in a while. Yeah. So, everyone's talking about Bachmann being the vice presidential candidate, and she will appeal to the Republican base. She's a staunch conservative, and she's a woman, and we got to get in. The Republicans have to get into the history books, and they're going to do it by putting her up as a vice presidential candidate. Maybe they can get a female VP to win.
Yeah.
And then the other prediction would, of course, be in November, and that would be, unless the elections are canceled, odds are Barack Obama is a one-term president.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the synopsis and the overview of that. Jonathan, why don't you take a second and tell the folks out there about some of the upcoming events in Duval County?
Okay, yes. But when this taping airs on October the 8th, the Libertarian Party of Duval County will be having a social hour 5 p.m. Saturday, October the 8th at the Bold City Brewery. That is, you can see, it's just so if you're a Libertarian, you just want to come out, have a round, talk politics or anything like that, we invite you to come out to that. We have our general meetings on the third Thursday of every month. On October, that will be...
Third Thursday, right?
Yeah, third Thursday. Yeah, third Thursday.
I'm
trying to remember the exact date. It'll be in October, but so like I said, third Thursday, 6:30. All that you can find on our website. Just click events when you get to jackslp.com, and that'll give you the address and all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
so.
Fantastic. And Richard, as the regional rep, I know you're like Johnny Appleseed out there trying, going to get some sprouts started in these other counties. Anything topical that you want to mention, or is there a website that people go to actually see the local regional events?
Our Region 7 calendar is at lpjacks.com.
Okay.
It is also there's a lot of things happening at the state level, and you can visit the state website at lpf.org. We have some interesting events going on in Jacksonville, in response to the state. Nullify Now, which is a big event in October, I believe on the 22nd, is going to be the only one in Florida for this particular group. And Libertarian Party of Florida is heavily involved in that. And a lot of your local Jacks LP folks will be there in force to support the party and to spread the word.
Tell people about that movement, the Nullify.
Thanks. I don't know that much about it. I've become aware of the event. I'm helping to get set up. I don't know a lot about Nullify.now.
Okay, that's fine.
Also, on October the 16th, the Libertarian Party of Duval County will be having a booth at the River City Pride Festival. It's the local gay pride festival in the in the North Florida area. We'll be having a booth there. We're looking for volunteers. Again, go to jackslp.com and look for ways to sign up for that. It's a great event, as you know, with the libertarian philosophy. We keep government out of the bedroom, and it's a great way to talk with a traditionally left demographic, but certainly one that is open to our message. So
fantastic. Well, believe it or not, guys, we're actually winding down to our last couple minutes of the show, so we're going to move kind of quickly through our next topic. But I do think it's interesting because from a libertarian perspective, there may be a couple of different angles people could take on this, and it's around Governor Perry's signature recently of a law that mandates drug testing for anybody that's receiving welfare in the state of Florida. We got an overhead on this. It was effective July the 1st. The recipients must pay for their own drug test, although I've read something that says that if the test comes back negative, they're actually reimbursed for those costs. There was a similar law that was struck down by a court in Michigan in 2003, but so far it has been upheld, although it has just recently had a legal challenge from the ACLU of Florida. And it was actually interesting. I printed out a quick summary about this ACLU lawsuit. There's a quote from the guy who the lawsuit was filed on his behalf. This guy is a 35-year-old Navy veteran. He's a student at the University of Central Florida. He receives welfare, and his quote is, "I serve my country. I'm in school finishing my education, trying to take care of my son. It's insulting and degrading that people think I'm using drugs just because I need a little help to take care of my family while I finish up my education." So very quickly, kind of your thoughts on this issue. I mean, obviously as libertarians, our view on drug use factors into this, our view of privacy figures in this, but then when somebody gets welfare, are there stipulations with that?
I think the overriding libertarian philosophy is why is government handing out welfare in the first place? That would be my question. Now, as for this law itself, I think, the underlying there is Rick Scott's ties to Solantic, along with other things, and I think this is, I honestly think this is something that is just a money grab for him and his buddies.
Right, with Solantic being a walk-in medical clinic that does a lot of the blood collection or drug testing processing, so there has been some issues around that. Richard, your take on this issue?
Philosophically, I'm in favor of anything that makes receiving free money from the government a little bit more inconvenient. I would be in favor of having the money distributed from a van that, kind of like a ice cream van that never really stops and you never know where it's going to be. But then again, and the gentleman in your email, if he's a veteran and a college student, why is he collecting welfare?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't think he's using drugs except for, why is he collecting welfare?
Right. I'm going to have you stop right there because we're actually at the bottom of the hour. But thank you very much for both of you. We'll look forward to having you both on a recent future broadcast, rather. So, again, thank you very much for tuning into the Libertarian Perspective. Look for us Wednesday, 7 o'clock here at Comcast and other selected times when you're channel surfing. You see us, go ahead and stop. We'll look forward to catching up with you next time on the Libertarian Perspective.